Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Sit comfortably because today we have a new pack of stories for you. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and here we go. I pulled the ultimate checkmate when my job tried to force me to quit for not returning to work a month after having my baby. I worked 50-plus hours a week managing the accounts and property for movie productions. Small productions like Ridiculous 6, mostly Netflix productions. I was hired as the director's and accounting assistant. I found out I was pregnant and notified them immediately so we could be prepared when I went on maternity leave. I went out of my way to make sure they were set by doing a lot of my work in advance. I completed closing up the account for the production on site and setting up the accounts for the new production arriving after my leave. I trained my temporary replacement. I didn't just work up until I went into labor. I went into work while in labor to work an 8-hour day tying up loose ends. I broke my back for this company, often going in on off days and getting out long after my shift ended. I used my car and gas with no compensation. I took company calls outside of work and off the clock. I was beyond a team player. They were covered. My replacement essentially just had to handle their basic requests, like opening a locked door or adjusting the temperatures for their office if requested, posting payments, opening mail, and answering phones. I was the director's assistant, but essentially I did the entire position because he always used the excuse of working in the field to stay home. He was on salary. A month to the date, out on maternity leave, I was contacted by my employer asking me to return from maternity leave. I still had 2 months of leave left, and the company doesn't provide insurance for the time, so this was out of my pocket. I stated I could not as I had complications and medical procedures coming up. I was told a few days later the amount of work that came up and my declining to return 2 months early left them no choice but to hire for my position. I knew my rights, so I wasn't worried and took the remainder of my leave. When I returned, they gave me only 2 4-hour shifts a week. Work was 15 miles outside the city limits, so I was essentially working for a babysitter and gas. I complied because I was painfully aware they were trying to get me to quit so they could avoid an unemployment insurance payout. It was time to play checkmate, and at this point, with my rights violated, I had the upper hand. They were a small company and didn't have an HR department. They often outsourced questions to the company lawyer in California because the laws were different by state and his specialty was not employment claims. The lawyer's advising was very limited. Well, they weren't aware that by cutting my hours by 46 hours a week, my employer just handed me the unemployment they were trying to avoid. In New Mexico, if your employer cuts you from full-time to part-time hours, they're responsible for providing an insurance payout to compensate the difference in wages temporarily. I knew this wasn't going to sit well with the arrogant director who thought him cutting my hours was going to be the shove I needed to exit the company. I patiently waited for them to receive my paperwork for my claim. They did, and boy, did the director let me know he was angry. The state was considering my claim should there be no attesting by the company. The director called me into his office requesting that we discuss my job duties. He emphasized how little work we had coming in and how financially inconvenient it had to be for me. He was so sympathetic to my situation and the anguish as a single mother it must be causing for me. When I stated I didn't mind, I was more than happy to be there, and my conditions of employment is I had to comply to my employer's work schedule and duties, showing that I'm actively trying to be employed. This didn't sit well with him. His manipulation wasn't working as he planned. He then turned serious as he casually mentioned my unemployment claim and proceeds to pull out my documents requesting a response. He tries to convince me that if I proceed with my claim and receive payment, if at any point I'm terminated for my performance, I would lose all source of income, unemployment, and the company. He was trying to threaten me. I knew this not to be true and called his bluff by informing him I wished to proceed. He stated to me that if I resigned right then and there, he would provide me a reference in the future moving forward. If you're terminated, you can't use them as a reference, depending on the circumstances of termination. But if he fired me, as long as I was complying, I would then receive the full amount of unemployment. At this point, he realized his tactics to intimidate me weren't working and I wasn't budging. He tried to level with me and ask what was needed to get me to leave the company, and I simply stated, "Fire me." Shocked, he asked me if I'm sure that's what I want. I reassured him. I walked out that afternoon with all my belongings and a letter of termination from my employer. I started receiving unemployment insurance the following week as he didn't contest my payouts. I had a new baby, and I was able to stay home for a year on my employer's tab. And our second story. You set the price. So I was an intern at a small startup during my education. When I initially got hired, they promised me that we could renegotiate my salary after 6 months. I gave it my all because I found the job interesting and challenging, and my bosses left me alone to work on large projects like making an automated shelving system for a factory, etc. No guidance or nothing. We moved to a new office, and I put in extra hours painting the office, epoxying the factory floors, and because of my interest in hardware, I made all network, print server, etc. During my first 6 months, I was paid around $12 an hour, normal student rates here, but I knew my boss was charging $70 an hour for my time to our customers. Went up to $115 my last year there, but now I had been there 6 months and some days completely alone, having to tend for everything in the company. But despite all my hard work and extra hours, I was told they felt I was paid what they thought I was worth, which apparently was about 15% of what they charged others for my time. This was, of course, a bit of a slap in the face, and being I was in the middle of my education and under contract, I couldn't just leave. So for the rest of my time there, I had to sit there for $12 an hour, knowing that they pocketed about $50 an hour on my work, treating me like crap and doing absolutely nothing to teach me anything which was part of their responsibility to me as a student. I got through my time as a student and quit the company as soon as my contract was up, and I never looked back. A few months after I quit, I received a phone call from my old boss, and the conversation went something like this. Old boss: "Hi, this is your a-hole old boss. We're having some network issues. Would you mind coming in to fix it since you're the only one with all the codes?" Me: "Sure. I'll charge you $115 an hour since that's the price you set for my time already." Old boss: "But that's way too much." I could hear the sound of steam coming from his ears. Me: "That's the price you charged for my time while you told me was worth only $12, and just for telling me it's too much, my rate just doubled." Old boss: "But you're the one that has all the codes. You can't do that. We can't get into the systems." Me: "Yeah? Well, good luck with that." Click. Best feeling ever. And our last story. Don't mess with the holidays. Disclaimer: this story isn't mine, it's from a friend. Backstory: we live in Portugal. Here, there is a law that states if someone abandons a plot of land and that is used by someone else for a minimum of 20 years, that person has the right to claim the land for themselves. This friend of mine had inherited a house in a town. This town is basically a beach holiday town. The rich people of the city nearby often had a house there and spent the whole summer there. This was in the early 20th century. Some people still do that, including my friend. So his family had been using a spot right next to their house as a playground for the kids for way more than 20 years. In fact, over 50 years. They hadn't yet needed to claim it since the owner didn't do anything to it, and as the whole neighborhood used it, doing so would be a-hole-ish. Until 2 years ago, when he decided to sell it to a couple that built a 2-story house there. The house completely ruined the view he had over the sea and also ruins the look of the neighborhood due to its differences to other houses. So my friend decided to claim the land. This was before the house was built, but since Portuguese justice is slow AF, the house was already fully built when it ended. This time with the approval of the other neighbors. The couple that had bought it had some friends in the justice system. The wife's mother was a retired judge. Her sister was a very well-known and respected lawyer, so they managed to overcome my friend's claims. On a technicality. But from the start, it was obvious that my friend should have got it. The way they got it was very shady. They only won because they knew people. And this is why he decided to get his revenge. The street between the two houses had free parking everywhere. This is because most people in the neighborhood are friends and don't have garages, so they park in front of their house. But the annoying neighbors had a garage. My friend had a truck that was once used for a restaurant of his. He parked it right in front of their garage door permanently. It was legal because they hadn't paid the town council a yearly fee to have a no parking spot there. After a few months, they decided to get that. That cost 8,000 euros a year to maintain. Until this point, it was more of a petty revenge. But the annoying neighbors had threatened him to remove his vehicle before that. They had said they would throw rocks at his windows, which they once did, and that they would flood his garden, which they did repeatedly, and even that they tried to kick his dog. A German Shepherd. They tried to punch the dog, but the dog bit the guy on the leg. As you know, those dogs bite hard. The threats were all recorded by my phone. Since he would record every conversation he'd have with them in person or over the phone, he'd taken pictures of the window and the garden. He sued them. And this time, the influence wasn't enough. They had to pay 10,000 euros repair for the window and garden, and he has a friend that evaluated the cost, conveniently quite highly, and had him pay another 30,000 euros in compensation for the mental health issues it caused. Out of rage, they sued my friend for his dog biting the man's leg. He had to spend a week in the hospital as it got very badly infected, and tried to make him pay for the hospital fees and compensation. But he defended himself, saying they invaded his property and even sued them for that, which led to a 1-year suspended jail time, which means if they're ever convicted of something, they will spend that year in jail on top of the conviction sentence. If they don't do anything else, they won't be going to jail. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.